So how then does one move through these stages of awakening and have this deeper experience of your true nature? Well, this is done through practice. And in the tradition, we could say, and this is not an explicit classification in the early tradition, but I think it's a very useful classification to look at the practices of the whole tradition with. And that is dividing the practices into two basic categories, which is Shiva and Shakti. Now, again, anthropomorphically, mythologically, Shiva and Shakti are depicted as a god and a goddess, mates, partners, a married couple even. And this is all, of course, actually metaphor. And the deeper meaning of Shiva and Shakti in the old days was only revealed once you took initiation into the tantric path. Before initiation, you would hear the stories and, you know, the mythology and Shiva and Shakti, and they had a baby and he lost his head and he got a new head, and that's Ganesh. And they had another baby that it sort of didn't really have, but they ended up having him. That's Skanda or Kartikeya. Anyway, all these mythological stories. And then you'd get initiated if you proved your readiness, your adhikara, your readiness for initiation. You would prove it by that you had a real spiritual longing, that you really wanted to do this practice, that you were serious about knowing the truth, and that you had your heart was opening and you had devotional feeling. So that was the usual sort of standard by which it was judged that you were ready for initiation. And then after initiation, you would be told, this is like the prestige, the reveal. Shiva and Shakti aren't really gods, that hang out in Shiva Loka, some heaven. They are actual symbolic representations of fundamental principles of reality. And the real nature of Shiva is consciousness or awareness, specifically wide open, spacious awareness, wide open, spacious, yet grounded awareness. And Shakti means energy, specifically patterned flows of energy. So when we see the depiction of Shiva and Shakti as a couple in conjugal union, a couple making love, that is supposed to be symbolic of the fact that when energy and awareness come together, then they give birth, as it were, to the whole universe. And that's only one level of the symbolism. It's also that when energy and awareness come together in our spiritual practice, we experience the bliss of knowing the truth. And so that's why the image of the sexual union became big. And this is another source for, by the way, the misunderstanding of the tantric tradition, is that Shiva and Shakti are depicted in sexual union, which is supposed to indicate to the practitioner who's initiated that when you bring awareness and energy to both into your practice in a balanced way, you do experience the bliss that is the natural byproduct of knowing the truth of your own being. So when awareness and energy work together in harmony in your spiritual practice, it's very powerful, because awareness serves to clarify and give definition and direction to the energy. And energy serves to juicify awareness. So in other words, if you were to, Shiva practices are practices that invite you into stillness and silence, openness, stillness, and silence. And so meditation, when meditation is not a technique, but simply dissolving into pure being, is a Shiva practice. And Shakti practices, by contrast, are working with energy. So energy body work and various kinds of healing work can be Shakti practices. The physical postures of yoga, pranayamas, visualizations, all these are Shakti practices. So Shakti practices build more energy in your total body-mind system. And Shiva practices bring you into stillness and silence in the ground of being. So as you might imagine then, if you do mostly or only Shiva type practice, you can become very still and very peaceful and very silent, and also eventually very sort of dried out and desiccated and fragile in a certain sense. So the image of the person who meditates too much is very much that of a fragile little old man with a beard, you know. Whereas the image of someone who does a lot of Shakti practices is more along the lines of a martial artist or a warrior or a very embodied being, a very powerful dancer, maybe. You know, so I'm just kind of give visual images that express this. And what becomes obvious when we consider the practices of the tradition, these two primary camps, Shiva and Shakti, is that when we do too much Shiva practice, we're still, but we're also in a certain sense rather empty. And too much Shakti practice is you get super energized, but without that ground of stillness and silence, you can burn out, or you can over push yourself, overdrive yourself, or worse still, the Shakti, the power of the yogic practices can serve to magnify your ego and magnify your egoic delusions. And that's less of a problem. It happens much more rarely if you're also doing the Shiva practice, which grounds you into the stillness and silence, which is very humbling, because when you really drop into the great stillness, it's so vast, and your little sense of self is such a tiny drop in that infinite ocean. It's deeply humbling, and it's less likely then that the Shakti generated in yogic practice will inflate your egoic delusions. So this is rather important within the tradition. We see that, you know, Shakti practices that generate energy in the body-mind system will serve to magnify whatever's already there. They'll turn a good person into a force for good in this world, a saint, you might say, and they'll turn a jerk into an even bigger jerk. It happens. So that's why balance in the practice is necessary for it to be a benefit to you and all beings. So balance of Shiva and Shakti practices, again, the cultivation of awareness, stillness, and silence on the one hand serves to clarify, lend definition, and beneficial direction to the energy. And the cultivation of the energy serves to enliven, or as I said, juicify awareness. So they're so complementary, so beautifully complementary, and that's the image of the symbolic image of Shiva and Shakti in conjugal union.